Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we will now be discussing Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, and there is a beautiful description giving some details about the birthplace, the holy birthplace, Kamarpukur. It's one of the most important places on the earth for devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. So let us just see a little about this wonderful village where Sri Ramakrishna was born. Though we will see later his ancestral or his father Kshudiram lived in a different village which was known as Dere, but we'll come to that later. But for under peculiar circumstances, they had to shift to this particular village, and it is only the wonderful uh, nature of his friend Sukhlal Goswami that he could settle down here. But anyway, let us see what how the birthplace is like. It is 60 miles northwest of Calcutta. Even today, that village is still there, and northwest part of Hooghly district, very close to the borders of Bakura and Midnapur districts. West Bengal is made of many small blocks or districts as they are known. So this village seems to be the Kamarpukur village is actually there is a cluster of three villages which form a triangle. They are Shripur, Kamarpukur and Mukundpur. So if you see, they were very small villages, a cluster of three villages which formed a sort of a triangle. And they are so close to each other that they appear to all the travelers who are passing by that road. They would think that it is one village. They are the different sections or parts of the same village. Now today, that is why the three villages together are now known as Kamarpukur. To all the previous, to the people in the surrounding villages, even now, and now especially, the Kamar town, the village has become quite big because so many activities are going on there. So all these three villages of Shripur, Kamarpukur and Mukundpur now are known as Kamarpukur. So it was a very prominent village even in the 19th century because there was a system of local landlords who used to lease out the land to the different farmers. Most of the farmers did not own land, they just used to cultivate that land, and a share of that would be given to the landlords who owned it. So each village had uh, one or two landlords who would own almost the entire land, and the other people, the farmers who cultivated the land, would be cultivating the same on leased out land. And that is how the landlords got a fixed small percentage of whatever they grew. But the farmers who really cultivated, they didn't own the land, they did not even have to buy the land. But if some land was free, they would cultivate it and give a share of that to the landlord, whoever owned that land. So we will see that some landlords lived, they sold it off to other landlords and then went away to Calcutta or some other parts of India. But Kamarpukur was, there were certain estates in rural Bengal which were tax free. They were not taxed because the land belonged to the guru of the Maharaja of Bardwan. Bardwan was there were small kingdoms, as you all know, there were small kings who were ruling. So the British government did not, the colonial government which was ruling India at that time, they did not disturb the small kingdoms as long as they paid the tax to the government exchequer. They used to collect this tax. So it suited the British colonial power to collect, to allow these small Maharajas or small Rajas who had small kingdoms and the area under them, under the king, his duty would be to collect the tax, keep a part of it for himself, and the rest of it he would pay to the government who was ruling India at that time. So the descendants of that family, it belonged to the guru of the Maharaja of Bardwan. So normally it was a very common practice for these kings to donate a substantial portion of the land of the village the to their own spiritual guru, who would be guiding him in all the spiritual matters, and even in sometimes in secular matters, giving him advice, counseling, and all those things. So Gopilal Goswami, the descendants of that guru of the Maharaja of Bardwan. So mostly these gurus, the children of those gurus, that goes in a lineage, and then they become the gurus after the passing away of the father. The son often becomes the guru of that king. So it's a lineage of gurus. They are known as Kula Gurus, or maybe some other name was there. So Gopilal Goswami, Suklal Goswami, there were two descendants of this guru of the Maharaja of Bardwan who were living there. And it was the whole Kamarpukur belonged to them. It was a tax-free estate. They didn't have to pay tax. There were certain areas in the kingdom which did not have to pay a tax. There was tax exemption, as we see. Charitable organizations do not have to pay a tax in many countries because they are doing charity. So also these spiritual gurus who guided, they were supposed to be living only on whatever income they got. So this Gopilal Goswami and Suklal Goswami were descendants of that lineage of gurus who guided, or who were the gurus of the Maharaja of Bardwan. So it was a tax-free estate. So he could do whatever he wanted. The land, anybody whom he wanted, if he could not cultivate the whole land, he would give it to somebody. And since there was no tax charge, it was easy for people to cultivate this land. He could gift it to anybody, any deserving person. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna's father got a small piece of land donated by his friend, the Sukhlal Goswami. We'll come to that later. Why Sri Ramakrishna's father had to leave his original village of Dere, which is a few miles away, quite a distant. It's not very close, but it is several miles away from Kamarpukur. And what were the circumstances that forced him to leave his own village, ancestral village, and come and seek shelter in this Kamarpukur? We'll come to that later. So now this town of Bardwan, the Maharaja of Bardwan was a major town in that area, and the ruler of that small kingdom was the Maharaja of Bardwan, owned a lot of land. So it is nearly 32 miles north of Kamarpukur, and a paved road begins at Bardwan and encircles half of the Kamarpukur village and then turns southwest to Puri. So many poor pilgrims who used to go to Puri. Puri is a famous pilgrimage place for most of the Vaishnavas. So Lord Jagannath's temple is there, the famous Jagannath temple of Puri. So many poor pilgrims and monks travel along this path which encircled Kamarpukur, because till Bardwan there was a train. So from there they had to go by foot. There were no connections perhaps, and poor people would not afford to travel by train. So most of them undertook this pilgrimage to Puri, passing through Kamarpukur. So a lot of monks and poor pilgrims would pass through Kamarpukur and sometimes even take rest there. And that is how Sri Ramakrishna came in contact with many of the pilgrims and monks, especially monks, wandering monks, who used to very often take this path and walk through Kamarpukur to go to Puri. There is a famous temple of Tarakeshwar Shiva about 20 miles east of Kamarpukur. So Tarakeshwar also, of course, had a station, And as you know, Kamarpukur and Jairambati are very near each other. Jairambati is the small village where Holy Mother was born. So most of the people who could afford a railway journey, a journey by train in those days, could go either to Tarakeshwar or to Bardwan by horse, by bullock cart or some other means, or just walk down. And from Tarakeshwar also, which is just 20 miles. Bardwan was 32 miles. It was a bigger station. Tarakeshwar also was a station, a small station from where if you walk 20 miles, it was lying 20 miles to the east of Kamarpukur. So there is a path to Kamarpukur via Arambagh. Arambagh was a slightly bigger village. It's a town now, but in those days it was a village. And there was a river known as Dwarakeshwar River. There were so many rivulets and rivers. Even in Jairambati, there was a Amodar River. So everywhere there were these rivers. And on the banks of those rivers, there were some bigger villages or towns. So Arambagh, from Tarkeshwar, if we got down at Tarkeshwar, most of the direct disciples and the pilgrims or the people, residents of Kamarpukur, Jairambati and all, they used to go to Tarkeshwar, then take a train to either Calcutta or Dakshineshwar whenever they wanted to visit, or any part of West Bengal. But they had to walk. So additionally, there were two more roads to reach Kamarpukur. One is from Ghatal, that is another place, 18 miles south, and another from Vana Vishnupur, which is 20. So from west, east, from south, and from northeast. Not north. North was Bardwan. To the east of Kamarpukur was Tarkeshwar. So there were many routes. The four directions, there were roads leading, passing through Kamarpukur to go to other places. So Vana Vishnupur was one place from where you could come to Kamarpukur, which was just 18 miles. So it was a centrally located village, an important village in that area at least, and connected to these four places. The main places, Bardwan, which already had a railway station, and Tarkeshwar. Other than that, there was one of Vishnupur. Vishnupur is a famous place, and there was Ghatal on either side, east, west, north, and south. Now, coming back to this was the location of the village. Now, the biographer says that the wonderful serene atmosphere, even today when you go, there's so much of construction and houses, but even today you will find a beautiful green, lush green area as soon as you approach Kamarpukur. So they were mostly agricultural villages. Even today, though the urbanization of that area has begun, but still you will find a lot of rural areas, large areas with paddy fields, expansive paddy fields, and they look like islands floating. These towns, if you look at it from above, it looks like islands which are floating on a vast green ocean. So there was greenery everywhere, and in between you will find suddenly you will find a small cluster of some houses which were these villages. The villages were healthy and strong because of the wonderful atmosphere surrounding their town. Lot of greenery, trees, mango orchards, and then trees, and lot of small rivulets, and also a very fertile land, plus ponds, very big ponds, and some lakes also. So it was a beautiful place for people to stay. Not only the villages were healthy and strong, but they were happy and contented. They didn't have many desires like the urban people had. The people of the city, though people like to flock to the city where they thought they will get better opportunities, but those who were spiritually inclined, for them this rural area was wonderful. If you are happy with the needs, that if your needs are fulfilled, if you are not motivated by greed, then these villages were the place where one could unfold one's spiritual nature. So that is the idea Swami Shardanand is giving here in this biography, that people were happy, and more important than that, unlike the people of the cities, where there was so much of competition, so much of pollution, and so much of crowd, that it was very difficult to be for people to be happy there. I mean, unless your needs were few. But here, if you owned a little, even a little piece of land, the people were happy and contented. They had an abundance of food because the land was fertile. Uh, it was easy to grow paddy, and the unpolluted fresh air, because of these and their hard working nature of these people. They were very hard working. That's why their needs were fulfilled. So apart from agriculture, the people engaged in smaller industries also, and various kinds. They were famous for some sweets which were known as jalebis. So these were the main professions. Other than agriculture, there were some sweet shops, and people used to come from far off villages to buy sweets from this village, and they made a decent living. And there were other ebony tobacco pipes. In those days, they used to smoke these pipes. So they had there was a great demand for these ebony pipes. So there were some people who were also manufacturing tobacco pipes from this ebony and exporting them to Calcutta. So that was also a decent way of earning a living. So once before Sri Ramakrishna's time, or even during his time, the city was, the town was also, or the village was also famous for uh, the yarn they made. The yarn, towels, cloth, and other handicrafts, bags, cloth bags, jute bags, and all those were manufactured in this village. But later on, they stopped. Now, of course, the Ramakrishna Mission has developed this Palimangal, that is rural development project, where many villages surrounding Kamarpukur and Jairambati, they have revived this ancient old industry, whereby making this towels and cloth for wearing and handicrafts, all handloom. So they don't require, they're all small sized machines are also there now, taking advantage of the small sized machines. So for local consumption, this handloom has a wonderful market, not only in local towns but also in Calcutta. So the famous uh, cloth merchants lived in this village, and they were very prosperous once upon a time. And they had a prosperous business because there was huge demand for clothes and clothing and yarn. Even yarn was, because there were cotton and other things were grown there. So even today, if you see, the tradition is still there, that there is a village market. Most of the products which were manufactured, or uh, manufacturing yarn, towels, and the manufacturing which was done, that manufacture was sold in markets on every Tuesday and Saturday. And even to this day, you will find that tradition is still there. Though now people prefer to purchase uh, factory cloth, which comes on, which is imported or maybe manufactured in other big cities, in industries, in cloth industries. But still there is a demand for this handloom, because handloom has a different quality. I mean, people, not only for the sake of the quality, but also people have sensitivity. They want to buy these clothes, especially some people in the town. They deliberately buy these hand woven fabrics, so that the people who earn a living, the poor people who don't have skills other than these manufacturing these towels and all, they purchase in large quantity, and it's even exported. They have wonderful designs, uh, though they are not manufactured in the using modern technology, but still these handlooms and with the small looms that are there. So there is still today, you will find on Tuesdays and Saturdays, there is a large place in Kamarpukur where the village market, everybody would come with all their products, the tobacco pipes, the sweets and all, and they used to sell and make a decent income and wait till next Saturday to sell and whatever they had manufactured or produced. So even today, as I said, people from Tarahat, there are a few villages, Badanganj, Shihor, where Hriday was born, Deshra and other villages which did not have this industry, they came to Kamarpukur. Now, of course, they come for Palimangal, which have the people are given all kinds of help. The Ramakrishna Mission monks, they have this Palimangal industry. It's an idea of Swami, Srimad Swami Vireshwaranji Maharaj, who wanted to do something for these poor people of Kamarpukur, Jairambati, and the local villages like Badanganj, Shihar, Deshra. So, the to encourage them, this Palimangal unit, which enables the villagers to come and work, they are given the raw materials, they come and work here and they sell their produce. So everything is enabled. There is a cooperative store where these products find a nice market. It is sold, in fact, the Kamarpukur products and Jairambati Palimangal products are so popular that all the centers of the Ramakrishna Mission all over India, they buy this and sell it in their bookstores. Along with the books, they sell these caps, dhotis, and then sometimes towels. They are very good quality and beautifully designed towels. So there are earthen pots, yarn, cloth, pitchers. The earthen pitchers are very famous. The fans made of, there are different fans which are made of all the agricultural waste and produce. Baskets, there's a lot of cane also is grown there. So cane and jute, using that, lot of fine and coarse materials like mats and commodities for daily use. It's a huge industry even today. Now, of course, they are supported by modern technology. Small machines have been designed for a small family so that they can manufacture a decent quality of these mats and cloth and other things. So they buy each other's products on this Tuesday and Saturday, as well as sell them for sale. Some merchants come, they buy in a huge quantity, take it to Calcutta and other big towns and sell it. So there is a lot of activity going on there even today, uh, based on agricultural and other produce. There is sweet meat, and so it's a very prosperous village. It was also very prosperous during Sri Ramakrishna's time. So, and moreover, as it is usual to see even today, that India of the rural India still lives. Those areas which have not been spoiled, unfortunately, modern society has introduced many things which are disturbing their simple living style. The luxuries have come, things have been imported from abroad and they are selling it, and the people are getting addicted to newer and newer things. But in those days, hardly any most of the things which were manufactured outside Kamarpukur hardly found their way into the market. It was the local produce, the local needs were fulfilled by the local farmers. They didn't have to have any kind of interaction with other countries or other states. So, but at the same time, the spiritual and cultural education or spiritual culture was spread through festivities. There were a lot of festivities which served, they call it a mela, these fairs. Every religious festival would have a fair associated with that. Even today, Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, on the Sunday following Sri Ramakrishna's birthday, there is a big market, there is a big fair where people can sell their produce, even in Belur Math, because it is a tradition of the past which is being still preserved. So during March to mid-April, Kamarpukur normally reverberates with the devotional songs where the worship of goddess Manasa, which is the deity of the village, and Lord Shiva, because Shivratri comes somewhere during March or sometimes earlier also. And beginning on the 11th day after the full moon, again, this is in March and between March and mid-April is one season. Then May and June, between the new beginning of the 11th day of the Ekadashi after the full or new moon in May or June. So, lot of Krishna's devotees, the Vaishnavas are there. So, these festivals and these festivities are always going on throughout the year. In addition, there are other festivities traditionally held all year around in the house of the landlord. Landlord normally took the lead and organized these big because he had a lot of surplus money, and they used to conduct these religious festivals where everybody participated, and some of them even managed to sell things because that was the season. Just as we buy presents during Christmas, there's a huge rush for selling and marketing goods. So you will find these festivities, though they were meant for a particular religious purpose, still it's helped the people to earn some money. And they used to wait for these events or these festivities to manage to sell whatever they had grown, agricultural produce or items made of the waste or the jute and the other cotton and other things. So, of course, at present now, when when Swami Shardananji was writing this biography, he is referring to that time. But he says that glory had uh, suffered a little bit. He says at present means in the days when he wrote this book, the grinding poverty of the village had put a stop to many of these religious festivities. So earlier when the village was prosperous, that means much before Sri Ramakrishna came, it was a very prosperous village, but unfortunately, due to changing circumstances, all of you know that cloth used to be purchased, manufactured in looms in America and England. So the cloth of Manchester, which was much finer and much cheaper because they were manufactured in bulk, found their way to all these rural areas, and that destroyed the local cottage industry. The people who are earning a living, that is why there was so much of opposition by the youths, because they were losing their jobs, and the cloth used to come in bulk. Very rich traders, Indian traders, used to buy cloth which used to be manufactured in Britain and other European countries because it was cheaper. The steam engine was discovered, and the looms and many things came from England, and these industrial produce, which was cheaper, was dumped on these villages. So slowly, the local villages suffered, and there was a lot of poverty, grinding poverty. So when Sri Ramakrishna was born, Kamarpukur was not as prosperous as it was 50 or 100 years earlier. That is because of the effects of colonialism, where the raw material were taken and manufacturing was done in big looms and factories and cloth mills in England and other parts of the world, the European in Europe, and they used to be marketed or purchased by rich traders from the cities who used to dump them in these villages, and naturally the people found that these things were cheaper than the local produce because of the sheer quantity of manufacture. If you manufacture anything in bulk, the price will naturally go down. So that had an effect on these festivities. People started celebrating these festivities in a simpler and simpler way because they didn't have the wealth to spend in these religious observances and the festivals. So slowly, lot of festivities stopped. Only the essential ones like Durga Puja and all remained. So at one time, there were, apart from the Hindu gods and goddesses, Dharma, that is the one of the gems of the Buddhist Trinity. We call the Buddhist Trinity. So in the Buddhist Trinity, first is Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Buddha is one part of the Trinity. Sangham Sharanam, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. Dharma means Dhamma. Dhamma means Dharma. Dharma means the religion or the message of Buddha. And Sangha is the religious order founded by Buddha. So this forms the Buddhist Trinity. It was worshipped because Buddhism had spread all over India. And Kamarpukur also, much before Sri Ramakrishna came, there was the influence of Buddhism, but slowly this dharma was transformed. This dharma, Hindus have this peculiar tendency of absorbing everything that was brought to them by foreign invasion or foreign ideas and culture. Of course, Buddha was Indian, but whatever Hindus got, they converted them into avatara. So you'll not be surprised if everybody claims Jesus also an avatar. Anybody coming from any religious personality, India, Hindus have no problem, and they consider different aspects, different prophets as different incarnations. So dharma was transformed into kurma, a tortoise. There in Indian Shastras or in the Indian tradition, there are 10 avatars, which are known as Dashavatara. Even a fish is worshipped as Vishnu. Vishnu comes as the fish, as the tortoise, as the boar, wild boar. So there are so many animals also other than the other avatars like Rama, Krishna. So they say there are 10 avatars. That is how the myths are propagated. So they converted this Dharma temple, which was originally a Buddhist temple, because when Buddhism declined, because of the revival of Hinduism or Vedic religion by Shankaracharya and other acharyas, slowly the Kamarpukur also, what will they do with the worship of Dharma? So they converted it into a temple for tortoise, the second of the 10 incarnations of Vishnu, and started worshipping that tortoise as Dharma. So it was nominally worshipped in a very nominal or a simple way in the surrounding villages. So even Brahmins, not knowing its origin, though they would not have worshipped it if they thought it was a Buddhist deity, but still they were so liberal that they didn't mind. Perhaps if a cross had found its way, they would have even worshipped the cross. But anyway, this tortoise, the idol of tortoise was worshipped as Dharma. Nobody knew where this word Dharma came from. It had come from Buddhism, but they were not bothered. So there were different dharmas, small temples of Dharma, which were old Buddhist temples, where the Dharma was converted, was considered to be, even Buddhist by some people considered many Hindus as an incarnation of Vishnu. So anyway, there was a chariot festival, just as we have the chariot festival of Jagannath. So there was in Kamarpukur once upon a time a big chariot festival where the chariot would be pulled and Dharma would be one of the gods. So one could see this tall chariot near the Dharma temple, but once it broke down, these wooden chariots with wooden wheels and all these things were very expensive to build. They were huge chariots. But once it got broken, then it was never rebuilt again. That is what Shardanji says. And this Dharma temple also fell to pieces because people worshipped other gods. So that's the thing. When certain gods are being worshipped in some areas, they lose their popularity. Nobody maintains those temples, and there are innumerable temples which now are in a very, very poor condition because of lack of worship. Many are in a very dilapidated condition. So one of these Dharma temple fell to pieces for want of repair. So one of the priests known as Yagneshwar, who belonged to Kamarpukur, he felt like taking the tortoise, since it was there in this dilapidated Dharma temple. He thought it should not be lying there. He took it to his home and started worshipping it. So, in this Kamarpukur, a little more details are given now by Swami Shardananji, because that gives us the backdrop of Sri Ramakrishna's Leela Sthana, or the places of pilgrimage. Even if you go today, there are so many small books about Kamarpukur, and both in English as well as the local language, which give a small short history, just as we have Bethlehem and other places which have, because the prophets or the Lord was born, they are sacred places. So also Kamarpukur, there are a lot of books giving all the details of the village, because Sri Ramakrishna was born there, before his birth, and the history and the present day. Everything is combined, the historical events that unfolded in this village. The Balya Leela, or the childhood days of Sri Ramakrishna, which were spent here, and also Jairambati nearby, and Shihor. These all villages are associated with the sacred memories of Sri Ramakrishna, the incarnation of this age. So, but in this village, there were people of all castes. It's not just the landlords and agricultural laborers and the Brahmins who lived here. There were Brahmins, there were Kshatriyas, there were weavers. Kshatriyas were normally used to take up jobs like police or maybe guards in the royal family. So they were known as Kshatriyas. Whereas there were weavers who used to weave cloth, milkmen. Each one formed a different caste. Blacksmiths, potters, fishermen, those who made pots. Then fishermen who caught fish in the ponds as well as from the river. And then there were some undertakers who used to, and money changers, of course, that was a very important, accountants and all, who used to deal with the money matters. So, but there were, other than the lush green fields for agriculture produce, there were beautiful ponds. So Haldar Pukur is the biggest, largest among them. Even today, Kamar Pukur is also, Pukur means pond. Kamar means belonging to the Kamar village. So Haldar Pukur is also associated with some Haldar or some name, but it is Pukur means it is a pond. So the biggest or largest among them, among all the ponds of Kamar Pukur, was Haldar Pukur. It is still there. It is a huge pond. And there are also small ponds, and there are a lot of 100-petal lotuses. If you go even today, you'll find beautiful swans and the wonderful 100-petal lotuses. Or there are plenty of white water lilies also. So along with lilies, surrounded by lilies, there you will find now and here and there these beautiful lotuses on these ponds. There was no dearth of brick buildings. Most of the buildings were brick buildings when Kamarpukur was prosperous, but later on, the huts, the tradition of building huts with cheaper material, those who could not afford, they would build mud houses using some bamboo frame and wooden frame, and then apply mud to it, a layer of thick mud which used to be collected from the bottom of the river, that silt. It became like clay. It was just like clay. So people who could not afford to buy bricks, and bricks were expensive, and so also the cement and other binding material, if people could not afford that, then they would build this small huts or small cottages with the locally available material. So from the ruins of Ramananda Shankari's temple, the temple and the houses, you can get an idea of the brickwork, the huge palatial houses that later on, because there was poverty in the village, everybody had to leave. Most of the people went to the city to earn a living because they lost their livelihood. That is one of the bad effects of the colonial rule, when lot of things which were manufactured in the cities, the big cities of the world like London, Manchester and all, they used to be exported, and as a result the local industry died. So all these rich people who were having these industries, controlling all these industries, they were forced to abandon their houses, the big houses. And that's why, though there were some old dilapidated brick structures were still there. Even today, if you go, most of the things have been demolished, but some of the things have been preserved as heritage buildings. Some old ancient temple, now the government does not allow people to destroy it because they are the remnants of the past. Several hundred years ago, you would find these beautiful temples uh, made of terracotta and other. If you go to Vishnupur especially, terracotta was an art. There is a special kind of brick which is used to build these temples. They last for a long time. So many of the temples have been restored, but there these you will find some dilapidated structures in Kamarpukur also. So there were two cremation grounds. Every village had a cremation ground where the bodies were burnt. There were obviously no other burial places. Might have been there because a few Muslims were there. But most of the people cremated their bodies because they were Hindus. And there were two brick crematoriums. One is Budhoi Moral and Bhutis Canal. So both of these places, though people did not go there even during the daytime because they thought it is haunted. Nobody goes to a cremation ground. Especially in India, it is a isolated place where people don't frequent. But Sri Ramakrishna, since childhood, right from his childhood, he used to enjoy because of the silence. The person who has a tendency to go inward, he will seek for silence. He would leave the noisy village, and very often, even from a young age, that desire for introspection, that desire for finding out the truth within, as Nachiketa, you find in the Kathopanishad, that when Yama tells him, unfortunately, most of the people look outward, but those who are dhiras, those who are real spiritual, have some real spiritual stuff, they try to discover the reality within and they get rid of all sorrow. They are the real ones who free themselves from the bondage of matter. So Sri Ramakrishna used to frequent these cremation grounds, Budhui Moral and the Bhutir Khal. It is known as Bhutir Khal, the canal which was to the northeast of the village, where normally, unless there was any cremation, it was a very, very isolated, surrounded by a lot of trees. So nobody would dream that Gadai or Gadadhar, as he was known, Sri Ramakrishna would be spending hours and hours together, sitting there and thinking about God, meditating upon God. So there is a big grazing field to the west of the Bhutir Khal, where there was a grove. Manik Raja was a small zamindar, landlord, and he had a public mango orchard. See, that is what the rich people used to do. They wanted to give back because they got a lot of income from collecting the tax and other things from their uh, because they are landlords, they don't do the hard work. So whatever profits they got, if they were really good landlords, they would build this public orchard, which is known as the mango orchard, which served the purpose. Anybody could go. There were so many mangoes that the poor villagers, anybody who wanted fruits, they could go and just pluck them. It belonged to the public. Was a public. Manik Raja's Amra Kanan, it is known as. Amra means mango, Kanan means orchard or a mango grove. So it was very near the Amodar river because mango requires a lot of water. And that river which passes through Jairambati was flowing very near where this orchard was. So this Bhutir Khal and all these wonderful places which are even now you will find a lot of people visiting these places, though they have changed a lot over, a lot of trees have been cut, but somehow now people, the mission authorities are trying to revive it, try to make it as close as possible as it existed during Sri Ramakrishna's time. So you'll find these wonderful places associated with the life of Sri Ramakrishna. So this Manik Raja was a very Manik Chandra Bandyopadhyay, that was his full name. So there was a village 1 mile to the north of Kamarpukur, which was known as Bhursobo village. So this Manik Raja, Manik Bandyopadhyay, was an extremely wealthy man. He was known as Manik Raja. The Raja is a title given to rich people. Raja means king. So Manik Raja, because he owned the whole mango orchard, and he constructed quite a few lakes such as Sukhsayar and Hatisayar in other villages which did not have natural ponds and lakes. So he thought of using his money wisely and creating big water bodies, lakes, so that they say he was so rich and he was so generous also that with all his wealth that he got, the riches he distributed without any reserve. So once it is 100,000 Brahmins from the whole area, I mean several villages, it would have been so many villages around. So he was invited, they were invited, but there was a big festival and he's famous for that. This Manik Raja fed all these people, obviously gave them gifts and fed them. So that is what this Manik Rajas, it's a famous place associated with Thakur. And Sri Ramakrishna was very fond because there were 2 cremation grounds near it, not very far. So he used to often go, sometimes maybe ate mangoes also. It was a public orchard. So after that he would perhaps sit and meditate. So a lot of time in Sri Ramakrishna's life, especially in childhood, was, according to him, spent in these 2 cremation grounds. So that gave him a kind of vairagya, a daily reminder that this is the place where we ultimately have to come, and our physical journey will end in this place. So that grim reminder actually served a wonderful purpose in this young boy. As Buddha, when he saw a dead body, a sick body, he started trying to find out, what is this God? How can I realize God before I die? So all these things, these wonderful places, the quiet Kamarpukur, but even a quieter cremation ground where he used to frequent, that ignited the sensitivities, the spiritual sensitivities of young Gadadhar. So there was also a fort, a small remnant of a ancient glory, where there was a fort southeast of Kamarpukur, known as, in a village known as Mandaran village. There was a fort, maybe a very rich king lived there. So it was built, a big impregnable fort was built. The remnants are still there. You can find that huge fort where the family, the royal family, would live inside, and the fort would protect them from enemy attack. And there was a beautiful moat constructed around the fort by carefully diverting the course of nearby Amodar river. So river was passing a little away, but to protect the fort, they created a moat so that people could not climb the walls. So there was a water body, a moat was created by using technology. Even in those days, they knew how to divert a stream, a river, big river like Amodar, and bring the waters and form a moat, so that that moat would not allow, it was like giving extra protection to these big forts. So this is the glorious village that Sri Ramakrishna came to live. How he came to live and what were the circumstances, we will discuss later. There's one more place which is near where people go, where archaeologists and other people, they go near this fort Mandaran, where this rich king lived. Near that there is a Shaileshwar temple. Most of these forts and the kings, they have their own family deity. So there is a Shaileshwar temple, and the they indicate this the importance during the Pathan rule from the 12th to 15th century. The Mughals came, so you will find the broken temples. Most of the temples and the images, if they are broken, they were destroyed during the Mughal rule. The Mughals, when they conquered India, thousands and thousands of temple, one cannot count. You go to any village, if you find a ruin, you will find the nose of the image of Shiva or the Shivlinga. Everything was damaged. Whatever came on their way, they have damaged. So the Islamic conquest, it's a reminder of the Pathan rule. So when you go, the Shaileshwar Shiva, the dilapidated structure, it's not just wear and tear because of lack of care. It was deliberately destroyed. Like most of the famous temples, including the Kashi Vishwanath, the Vrindavan temple, in the Mathura temple, and then we have the uh, famous temple of Ayodhya, which has now been rebuilt. So many of the structures, even in the villages, they were destroyed during the rule of Pathans who came from across the border of India, from Afghanistan and further to the west. So they came, and when they came, when they occupied these lands, and the first possible opportunity, the first thing they did was to destroy these temples. So many of the gods and goddesses were taken away and hidden in the forests. And somehow many of the idols were saved because they knew when they got the news that the army is coming to destroy the images. So at least the images were taken away, and they were preserved in a hideout in some cave or something for several years. Only after the British rule, or only after the Mughal rule was over and the British came. British, of course, did not believe in destroying places of worship. They were more positive. I mean, they would build churches and convert, but they were not keen to destroy the already existing temples or mosques. Mosques, a lot of mosques were built by the Islamic rulers who ruled for nearly 700 years. But between 12th to 15th century, because Bengal was so far away in the east, they did not rule it for a long time. So there is the rule of the Pathans was from 12th to 15th century. So 300 years they ruled, not all the 700 years. Of course, Delhi and the western parts of India were ruled for a much longer time. But only a few emperors, Mughal emperors, managed to reach and destroy the temples in the far eastern states of Assam. Assam and all, they could not go, but at least they came up to Bengal, and they went south up to a certain Maharashtra and other states. So the existence of the famous battlefield of Mughal Mari. So even today, you will find that a huge elephant stable where the local kings used to defend their forts. No doubt the Mughal army was huge and they had their own elephants and horses. But there were these battlefields, open lands where the battles were fought. It is known as Mughal Mari. So you'll find a very, very powerful and historic place, this Kamarpukur. So that is the background of Kamarpukur. Now in our next class, we'll come to the story of Ramananda Roy, the landlord of Dere village. The Dere village, it is a couple of miles west of Kamarpukur. There are three villages, Satpede, Narayanpur and Derepur. They are located just like Kamarpukur and other villages are there. They were very prosperous. So this Dere village was the original ancestral village of the Khudiram. Khudiram was Sri Ramakrishna's father. So his grandfather and all, they all lived there. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna, of course, was born in Kamarpukur, but his father, he was born in this Dere village. And why they had to leave Dere? Why the landlord Ramananda Roy removed him from the village? Because he would not testify on behalf of Ramananda Roy. He was making a false case. And Sri Ramakrishna's father was so much wedded to truth. He said, I would rather leave the village and go, because he knew, he threatened him, if you don't tell this falsehood in the court and don't testify supporting me against somebody whom he had wrongly robbed, who was wrongly robbed by this Ramananda Roy. So he told Sri Ramakrishna's father, who was, because if he testified in court, he would win the case. But Ramananda, Khudiram Chattopadhyay refused. He said, in my whole life, I have never spoken an untruth. And that too with these evil designs, I will not be speaking. So he said, then you will see how I will drive you out. He was a zamindar. Naturally, he had that power and somehow prepared some false documents, and we'll see all those things. How from Dere, Sri Ramakrishna came to this Kamarpukur. Though he was born in Dere, the Lord had decided to be born in Kamarpukur. So they say man proposes and God disposes. So wherever the God wants, whether the Lord wants, Ishvara wants, he will incarnate in that village. So the fascinating story of how Sri Ramakrishna's father, Khudiram Chattopadhyay, came to the Kamarpukur village because of the wonderful heart of Suklal Goswami, who was a friend, whom his father also knew. He also knew. They were close friends. So he offered his own a small piece of his land and said, you come, because he had left everything. With a few possessions that left their house and their land, they were driven out by this cruel Ramananda Roy, the landlord of this village. He said, no, you have to, I will not extend your lease, you have to leave. So anyway, he came. That is another story. Why Kshudiram came. And the land which Suklal Goswami gave them as a gift to his friend. He said, you stay here, there is a small house and a small piece of land. You cultivate and stay in this village. Don't worry. Maybe you are driven out, but I will help you. Even today, that small land, I think Suklal Goswami, who donated this small land for growing paddy so that they can earn a living, is so pure. This gift is so pure that even today, so many years have passed, more than 200 years have passed nearly, and the rice which is even today, the rice which is offered to Sri Ramakrishna during puja and during bhoga, it comes from this field. They don't give Sri Ramakrishna any other rice, no matter how much rice is donated by devotees. It is all used to feed other people. But Sri Ramakrishna's food, the rice which is offered to Sri Ramakrishna daily, is grown in this plot of land which belonged to Suklal Goswami. So by his small donation, by his small gift, he has eternally got the gratitude of the Lord. You can imagine, even today, the food must be so pure, the rice must be so pure, and the gift which he gave was so pure to his friend. When he was in need, if you gift somebody when they are really in need, that gift has a huge value. And that gift was so sattvic that Sri Ramakrishna, not only his father, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, everybody lived on that small piece of land when they were there. After their passing away, this same plot of land is even today, to this day, the rice that is grown in this small paddy field, which was gifted by Suklal Goswami to his dear friend Kshudiram Chattopadhyay, the father of Sri Ramakrishna, is being used. So much so for this story. But what actually happened and why he had to leave the village, we'll discuss in our next class. So I'll just see if there are some questions. So I think all of you are able to hear me. Yes. Somebody has written here that audio is not able to hear the audio. I think all of you have heard. The audio was clear, perhaps, with the video. Anyway, honey is also very good, of very good quality. Of course, there will be honey and other agricultural products as well. Yes, because it's a wonderful place. There are so many flowers. So naturally, now Palimangal also supports honey farming. I mean, the honeybee cultivation. The honeybee honey is manufactured in large, but that I think is a more recent development. Anyway, is Sri Krishna's original house preserved as it was before? Do any of his descendants still live in Kamarpukur? No, they live. They live. Some of his descendants are still there. They do puja in some of the other temples, but they don't live in that house. That whole house has been converted and rebuilt. Of course, in the same place, they're just maintaining it. It is as it was when Sri Krishna lived there, when he was born. Of course, some modifications have been made, some repairing work is constantly being done. But that famous house, that house where he was born, that house where he lived and where Holy Mother also lived later, now nobody lives. It is under the Kamarpukur center. The family, of course, the descendants of Sri Ramakrishna, who mostly I think they are maternal descendants, but anyway, they are staying in a house in the same village, but they have been given the privilege of doing some puja in some of the family deities, like Raghuvir, the small Raghuvir hut where Raghuvir temple used to exist. It has been preserved and it has been renovated, and that puja is still done by Sri Krishna's family. Though the land and everything belongs to the monastery, still the puja is going on. Now, uh, uh, is there any Ramakrishna group or mutt in Kamarpukur? Yes, yes. It's not only a group, it's an international place of pilgrimage. They have a huge guest house. People come from not only all over India, but all over the world. People from every part of the world, they come to Kolkata and then take a taxi and go to Kamarpukur. They have beautiful guest houses now. A lot of construction and small scale industries for helping the poor people to increase their income have been done by the Kamarpukur Center. There is a beautiful hospital there where patients are treated free of cost, charitable dispensary, then eye clinic. There are many, many activities going on. Cottage industry, everything is there. Yeah. Is there any trace of descendants of the friend who gifted the plot of land? I have to find out. I think some that Goswami family, that lineage, though they don't live, I think, anymore in that village. Maybe the descendants have shifted to some other part of Bengal, or maybe they have gone abroad also. We do not know. Many of the descendants, because they were rich landlords, so they might have shifted to Calcutta, but it is worth finding. We'll have to do some inquiries. But Suklal Goswami's donation, even today, that family, Suklal Goswami was a great, great friend of who, when he was in trouble, when nobody was giving any shelter to Khudiram with his wife and children, they had been forced out of Dere village. It was the Sukhwalal Goswami who, though he was very rich, or he had a large land, he was a landlord, which was gifted. They were the Brahmins, they were the gurus of the Raja of Bardwan. So they were spiritually very noble. But that family gifted this house, the house where Sri Krishna and his father and Sri Krishna was born. Everything was gifted by Suklal Goswami. So their descendants would be still be there around. And I don't know whether uh, those people feel proud of the fact that their ancestors had donated when there was a dire need, when they were in great difficulty. Sri Krishna's father was gifted this land. It's worth inquiry. Yes. There is just wonder, the gift offering of any arbiter or any object has to be purified from heart, then it is fruitful. It has to be purified, but the intentions have to be good. The idea is, it's not what gift you give. It may be a very humble gift, but if the attitude or the heart is pure, the intentions are pure, and it is given when a person really needs it. If you give dana, has to be done very carefully. Dana manabhyam. Dana, you have to serve, no doubt, by gifting, but it has to be gifted with honor. It's not that I throw a few coins, I'm doing some charity, you should be grateful to me. Not like that. If it is done with dana and mana means respect, that you are the image of God, I am offering this to you. Perhaps Suklal Goswami, though he gave, though for him it may not have been a very big thing to donate one house and some piece of land, but he did it with tremendous respect to his friend. And that is why I think the family, several generations of that family would, otherwise Sri Krishna would not accept food from anybody. But even today, Suklal Goswami's land, that small piece of land where rice is grown, only that rice is used for offering to Sri Krishna. So you can imagine how much sattvic that gift would have been, how much of pure his heart would have been. So it is not a coincidence that Sri Krishna's father had such great friends, because he was himself a noble soul who would not tell untruth even if he was removed or thrown out of the village. Okay. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.